This video will contain spoilers for the week before. If you haven't read it yet, turn back now. The Week Before is the newest entry into the FNAF series, and honestly, this franchise is on a roll as of late. Interactive novels like this are the perfect middle ground for people like me who really want to keep enjoying new developments in the story, but also really don't like reading books. So on that note, what kind of developments to the story did The Week Before give us? Let's get one thing straight off rip. There's going to be a continuity debate somewhere, and there's going to be people on both sides saying that their answer is obviously the correct one. I know it, you know it, so let's just skip the whole song and dance and just take this book directly at face value. Whether or not this is in continuity with the games, I don't really care about that right now. Maybe I'll have that talk some other time, but not today. Now with that out of the way, let's start off with something that gets hinted at almost immediately. This book seems to imply that the FNAF 1 animatronics actually are retrofitted versions of the withered animatronics we see in FNAF 2. This is something that people have been considering for a long time, but there was never a real conclusion drawn for it. But in this book, we're given a few hints that can definitely sway some people's opinions. On the first night, we get this. The brown bear is dapper as always in his black top hat and bow tie. You're glad they restored the vintage animatronic with his classic look. The phrase, restored the vintage animatronic, definitely helps push the idea along, but on night 2 we get another hint in the form of Ralph defending himself against Foxy. You dash toward the shelves and pick up the flashlight just as Foxy bursts into the room. You whirl around and press the button on the flashlight. Luckily, the batteries inside still work. A bright beam cuts across the dark room and shines on Foxy's face. You thought maybe it would blind him temporarily so you can slip by, but the light seems to mess him up. He freezes in place, servos clicking in confusion. You hope you won't get in trouble for breaking Foxy. This is very similar to FNAF 2, where you had to use the flashlight to stun Foxy whenever you saw him in the hallway, because he wasn't fooled by the Freddy mask like the rest of the animatronics were. And funnily enough, that's another thing that gets referenced in this very scene if you make the wrong choice. In a moment of panic, you grab the spare Freddy Fazbear mask and drop it over your head, then stand still. As soon as you put the Freddy head on, you want to tear it off again. But you don't dare, because through its eye holes, you spot Foxy standing in the doorway. He stalks toward you and stops, only inches from your Freddy face. He leans forward to look into its eyes. He sees you. Could this just be a silly little callback? Sure, maybe. But to me, I think it'd be pretty weird to throw lines like this in and have them not actually mean anything. So, going forward, I'm going to operate under the assumption that the FNAF 1 animatronics are retrofitted versions of FNAF 2's withered animatronics, which, honestly, probably doesn't tell us much else, but I think it's worth mentioning at the very least. Next up, I'd like to talk about when this takes place. Well, obviously it takes place the week before FNAF 1. That's something we all knew going into it and was more or less beaten into our heads over and over again. But something else it gives us is actually another hint at what year that might be. Early on in the book, Ralph can stumble upon an audio recording of himself, where he gave a message to whoever was working the night shift as a security guard. This isn't actually one of the recordings we hear throughout the games, it's a little bit different. Though, we'll talk more about that later in the video. That's not what's important here though. What is important here is Ralph's response to it. He recalls that this was around the time that his daughter Coppelia had been born, and we're told that she's 11 years old during this book. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was founded in 1983, and we have reason to believe that Ralph has always been loyal to Freddy's. So if his daughter was born around the same time that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was founded, and she's 11 years old now, then this book should be taking place sometime around 1994. Now, with that said, there's definitely some necessary leeway to be used here. It's not like we're given exact dates here, only general estimates. But with that said, this is really close to lining up with FNAF 1 taking place in 1993, which has historically been one of, if not the most common answer for when FNAF 1 takes place. I don't think this sets it in stone or anything, since, like I said, you have to use some leeway for this answer to work, but I definitely think it could serve as a piece of evidence. Personally, I've been of the mindset that FNAF 1 takes place in 1993 for a while now, so I have no real complaints about this outcome. Now that the easy part's done, let's talk about something big. In the book, there's a moment where Ralph is prompted to enter a 4-digit code into a phone. One of your options here is 1983, which plays the recording of the bite of 83. Ralph hears the sound of the crying child sobbing away the entire time, until it's abruptly stopped by the sound of Fredbear crunching down on him. But when he hangs up the phone, he hears the sound of a child still crying. Then, when he turns around, the sound of someone's head being crunched down on plays throughout the office again. I saw a lot of people online when the book was being leaked say that this is direct confirmation that the crying child possesses Golden Freddy, which is further supported by something that happens later on, which I'll get into in a bit. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm a massive believer in the fact that Golden Freddy is possessed by both the crying child and Cassidy. And in truth, this book actually referenced one of my biggest pieces of evidence to support this claim, as well as giving me a new one, kind of. Let me explain. First off, I'd like to explain to you all what I've believed "it's me" means for a while now. In the survival logbook, we can clearly see that there are multiple souls speaking inside of it, as well as Michael Afton speaking through a red pen. And given the questions that are being asked from one soul to another, we can almost 100% confirm that one of these two souls is the Crying Child. More specifically, the Crying Child is the soul that's speaking by altering text in the book. But what if I told you that this isn't the only time someone in this franchise has spoken through altered text? Let's circle all the way back to FNAF 1 for a moment, and check out the camera system. More specifically, let's take a look at Pirate's Cove. I'm sure you all know how this works. Over time, Foxy will slowly make his way out from the curtains and come charging toward your office. But what you might not remember is the fact that when he leaves, something can happen to Pirate's Cove. When Foxy isn't there is a non-zero chance that the sign in front of Pirate's Cove changes from saying "out of order" to "it's me." The phrase that, for the longest time, has been directly associated with Golden Freddy is being spoken through existing text being altered in the very first installment of the franchise. Not only do we see this in FNAF 1, but it also ends up happening again in the week before. And we can take this a step further. Despite "it's me" being an iconic phrase from the series, it stopped showing up at a certain point in time. It's present in every single game where we can see a possessed Golden Freddy, all except for Ultimate Custom Night. Why is that? Well, it's because of something that's been right in front of our faces since FNAF 3. Happiest Day, the minigame where a kid puts on a Golden Freddy mask and then fades away, and it takes place in what appears to be a reflection of the FNAF 4 Fredbear's location. This is the Crying Child, moving on peacefully into the afterlife. Meanwhile, in Ultimate Custom Night, we can see that Golden Freddy is still active, and is still just as vengeful as ever. The phrase "it's me" for the longest time served as a foundation for the reason that I believe the Crying Child is a part of Golden Freddy, always calling out by saying "it's me." And along with him is the vengeful spirit, who isn't ready to move on and wants to keep William Afton a personalized hell until the end of time. But in truth, this book also changed my mind on that in a way. I don't think that "it's me" means what we all originally thought it meant at all, because it's not just associated with Golden Freddy in this book. It's repeated over and over again, partially by Golden Freddy of course, but also by just about everyone else. There's even a dream sequence in one of the endings where Ralph hears his daughter's voice coming from Chica saying "it's me." So what does it actually mean? Well, at the moment, I take it as a sign that a spirit is trying to reach out to someone. Maybe it's because they want attention from someone else, or maybe it's because they're trying to reinforce who they are so they don't lose themselves. Right now, it's really hard to say for sure. This is something that I'll probably have to come back to in another video down the line, once I've had a chance to do more research into the topic. But for right now, I'll go with the safest answer. "It's me" is the sign of a spirit trying to call out to someone. With that out of the way, let's get back to the identity of Golden Freddy for a moment. If Ralph signs up for overtime, he can return to Freddy's one final time and come into contact with Golden Freddy for the first time. At first, he stares directly at him, afraid to break eye contact. But for a moment, he looks away to check on the rest of the animatronics to make sure they're not going to attack him. Then, when he looks back, Golden Freddy gets in his face and starts screaming. Ralph falls to his knees and Golden Freddy grabs him by the head. Then, something really confusing happens. There's an angry onslaught of noise in Ralph's head, repeating "it's me" over and over and over again. But underneath it, Ralph can pick up someone else's voice. A woman's voice that's described as soft, warm, and gentle. She says, "It's me. Thank you. You did it. She'll be alright now. She's safe. She's safe." Then the onslaught of noise slowly changes from "it's me" to "she's safe." After this, Ralph smiles and passes out. On one hand, this seems like direct confirmation that there are multiple souls inside of Golden Freddy. He grabbed onto Ralph's head, and suddenly Ralph started hearing two voices in his head. But there's a different problem. One of these voices is specifically described to be a woman. Not a girl, a woman. An adult. But every character that we've ever thought possesses Golden Freddy has been a child. So this completely throws everything we thought we knew off. So now I have to ask, who actually is speaking to us here? Well, the first thought I had was a character introduced on Night 5 named Bronwyn Blight. She broke into Freddy's through a window sometime before Ralph's shift started on Night 3. Fun fact, there's glass on the ground where she broke through, because the force from a window breaking pushed the shards of glass out from where she originally was, which is a detail that is only important when people decide it to be. That aside, Bronwyn broke into Freddy's and got stuffed into a suit while trying to stop the animatronics from breaking free. So she asks Ralph in her final moments to pick up where she left off, warning him that everyone, especially Coppelia, is in danger if he doesn't listen to her. So when a woman's voice thanks Ralph for his actions the very next night and tells him that she's safe, my mind immediately thinks that it's Bronwyn telling him that Coppelia is safe now. and thanking him for listening. And while that makes sense, there's a tiny issue with that. Bronwyn wasn't stuffed inside of Golden Freddy. Bronwyn was stuffed into a regular Freddy Fazbear suit, much like the Game Over screens from FNAF 1. Ralph takes notice of how different Golden Freddy looks compared to the regular Freddy animatronic, talking about his golden fur and his lack of eyes. He makes none of those distinctions when looking at the suit that Bronwyn is stuffed into, so I have no reason to believe that she wasn't just stuffed into a spare Freddy suit. So then, what's going on here? How could Bronwyn be speaking through Golden Freddy if she was stuffed into a different suit entirely? Well, there actually is an answer for that. Soul shattering. Here's the gist of it. Bronwyn, after being stuffed into the suit, was still alive, barely, for a little while longer, and she used the remaining bits of her strength to leave a voice message for Ralph. But at the end of the voicemail, something happens. Bronwyn is cut off by the sounds of a child's laugh, followed by a mechanical roar. The next and final thing she says is, "It's me," but her voice is low and garbled. What I think happened here is that, despite being stuffed into the Freddy suit, she was finished off by Golden Freddy. When this happened, her soul shattered. Part of it stayed in the Freddy suit, and part of it went on to the Golden Freddy suit that had killed her. This isn't unheard of for FNAF. It's something that a few people theorize happens to the crying child. You might have heard this referred to as Shatter Victim. His soul was split up into multiple parts and are brought together through the minigames of FNAF 3 and FNAF World, leading ultimately to Happiest Day, where he's finally put back together and can move on peacefully. I suspect that this is what's happening to Bronwyn in this ending. And if it is, then it shows that Shatter Victim is entirely possible, and that despite Crying Child not dying in the Fredbear suit, a piece of his soul could have still tethered onto it. To end this video, I want to talk about one final thing. The canon ending for this book, which is weird. You might think that the ending I just described to you is the canon one, and yeah, that would certainly make a lot of sense, but there's a slight issue with it. We're playing as Ralph, otherwise known as FNAF 1's phone guy, and in FNAF 1, Ralph dies during his shift as the night guard. We even hear the moments of his death, which never happens in this ending. So how can this be the canon ending if it directly contradicts the events of the game? Well, if this book is meant to be in continuity with the games, then that can't be possible. However, there is a good alternative. By getting this ending, you unlock the mobile phone bonus item, which you can use throughout the story if you want to restart it. And throughout 4 of the nights, Ralph gets a chance to use this bonus item to record a message for whoever replaces him as the night guard. These are the messages that play during the first 4 nights of FNAF 1. So, therefore, this should be the canon ending, right? Well, while that makes sense, think of how we got here. This isn't the normal route for this book. This is, well, for lack of a better term, this is more or less New Book Plus. It requires an item that Ralph can technically only get his hands on by fulfilling Bronwyn's wish, which he can't possibly do on the route where he dies while recording his final message for Mike Schmidt. This is probably just me being really nitpicky, but technically speaking, this cannot logically be the answer. So if that matters at all, then it's actually impossible for this book to be in continuity with the games. But I know that most of you are just gonna brush that off and say that it doesn't matter, and I said at the start of this video that I wasn't gonna bother getting into the continuity debate here, so I'll stop stirring the pot for now. Anyway, that's all for me. Next week, I think we're gonna talk about the week before some more, and if not, then we might be talking about FNAF 1 in general. This might be a common trend of the channel for a little while, so please, bear with me. I'll get to other topics later. I have a few planned out, actually. Make sure you guys leave a like and stay subscribed. I'm gonna do my best to keep consistent on this channel from now on. I know I was gone for a year, but I like to think that I'm slowly making up for that. Slowly. Let's hope it lasts. So, until next time, take it easy.